With this work, we have established as the main objective the incorporation of a new methodology for risk management, starting from a participatory risk assessment, where the priority is that the entire staff is involved, as well as help in their development. So this new model will be based on 3 pillars used by TUSCA. First, the importance that everyone understands both the hazard and risk. Second, make a commitment to process safety and actions. And finally, to manage risk. This is how we arrive at our main goal, to create a new culture for this company. Now the question is, how to have these 3 pillars connected and work in the right way. To achieve it, we need to improve aspects of the approach currently used by companies, such as the mapping process, which will be crucial for the development of risk assessment, this being the most important aspect to modify, as this is a cornerstone to achieve our goal. It is important to note that the risk assessment results could be supplemented with the use of a risk register tool offered by TUSCA. Now the question is, how can we improve them? With the creation of a much more detailed mapping process assessing both human aspects as machinery. With this detailed mapping process and using a new approach of participatory risk assessment, it's possible to improve the identification of problems and their solutions. Now, which companies have implemented this approach? Until now, it has been possible to start up this approach in 2 companies located in Ireland. Boortmalt, a company dedicated to the elaboration of malt, with several locations in Europe, being the 5th largest malt producer in the world and number 2 in Europe. And the second company is Diageo, the most traditional British multinational alcoholic beverages company with a commercial success worldwide, especially in the UK and Ireland. Regarding Boortmalt, the participatory risk assessment has been implemented during cleaning of barley grain storage bins, considered one of the more dangerous activities at the time of maintenance operations for a Boortmalt company. This task involves abseiling installed on the top of the bin while the workers clean the internal walls. Additional hazards include the possible presence of carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and other gases at potentially fatal levels. Diageo. The bottling process for Sheridan's beverage was selected to apply the participatory risk assessment. A process involved is the role of human factors and machine systems. The Sheridan's line is divided into 4 parts. A first step known as depalletizing of empty bottles and feeding them onto the line. A second step where the bottles are rinsed and filled with the liqueurs and finally capped. The third step involves labeling, and a 4th and final step of packaging. Once the working scenarios and targets for each company are established, so starts the creation of a detailed mapping process. To obtain a detailed mapping process, based on a functional analysis and HAZOP analysis, the results were developed using the task hazard software. The methodology considered for the data recollection was visits the work area to analyze each of the activities, analysis of the tasks, interviews with workers, and analysis of previous reports. What's included in the software? A quick explanation. It consists of a workspace that allows the creation of a task mapping where each icon describes the activity to develop, the actor involved, tools used, and IT tools used. A palette that helps clarify the kind of function and inserter, and an explorer to navigate the software. What have we found in Boortmalt and Diageo after the data collection? Mainly the need to create a structured mapping process where the procedure is clear and thus avoid confusions, who will execute the tasks, and the right tools and equipment to use. Additionally, we found that some tasks are omitted and there are new operations to consider. All these problems were solved once created the mapping process on task hazard software. In the board mold case, we have created a list of activities during the cleaning of the bins, which is divided into 8 steps, where 62 tasks were identified. There was a remarkable increase due to in-depth analysis, exceeding more than twice the previous reported tasks. In other words, there were 23 tasks described in the previous report by Bornold, thereby obtaining a task analysis clearer and more complete compared to the previous analysis. Regarding Diageo, the analysis of Sheridan's line or line 6 was divided into 5 activities: changeover, procedure used depending on size of the bottle to be filled; pre-checks or startup; operations, shutdown, and maintenances. Once you enter each of these activities, it is possible to analyze the tasks for each area of line 6: depalletizer, filler, labeler, packer. Considering these new activities, the number of tasks for the Sheridan's line have increased dramatically, from 54 previous analysis to 322 tasks, obtaining results almost 6 times more than a previous analysis. Once the detailed mapping process is created, finally we can proceed to the implementation of participatory risk assessment. For a better identification and analysis of hazards and risk assessment, a workshop with expert staff and personnel involved in activities was prepared. The identification of hazards, causes and consequences, and finally proposed mitigation plans for each problem to achieve risk reduction. First workshop was carried out for a better visualization and identification of critical activities, in which for each activity is defined a criticality level where 1 presents a low impact and 3 a high impact, from 3 criteria: impact on production, hazardous, and complexity. So the result of these 3 criteria defines the level of criticality of the activity: high, moderate, and low criticality. We have a scheme of how the identification of hazards and the risk assessment during workshops was performed. During the analysis of every task, the results are being added to the software. When you select an activity, you can insert their deviations or hazards, antecedents or causes of deviation, and their consequences. Upon completing this task, we can define the severity and likelihood for every deviation. In this way, we calculate the level of risk based on risk matrix used depending on their impact, whether OHS, product quality, or productivity of the process. And finally, we identify their safeguards and recommendations. After analysing the results of the risk assessment in Bortmalt, we found 43 potential hazards during the operation of maintenance of the bins, related to the 62 steps within the process map, which when analysed was greater than the previous method. The number of hazards identified applying the participatory risk assessment method is almost 3 times larger than the previous method. Looking into the details, the highest number of the deviations are generated by technological factors, generating a high impact on worker safety involved in the activity. Regarding Diageo, the identification of 462 deviation regarding the 322 tasks identified using the participatory risk assessment method after the workshop for line 6 has been achieved. The possible problems are divided mainly into 3 aspects, due to complex procedures, human errors, and technological factors. This is how the consequences can affect both the worker safety, with 63% followed by the productivity of the line. Once we identify the hazards and their consequences, the next step is to implement safeguards. During the selection of mitigation plans, it has started with the implementation of existing controls created by each company. However, we have incorporated new control measures because many of the problems had not been considered. This is how these mitigation plans are being presented and implemented during workshops with all staff. Some tasks need to be improved, which is why we decided to leave some recommendations. We have divided the recommendations for abort molds in 3 points. First, the needs to change some tools, such as in the case of changing the conventional filters by specific filters. Second, review the tools conditions before cleaning, as state of the filter's abseiling tools. And finally, a pre-installation. Check the abseiling installation. For Diageo case, we have been divided the recommendations into 3 groups. A new maintenance routines for each machine used in line 6. A new work plan to improve the productivity and reduce accidents. Finally, training for the workers due to the implementation of new activities that were being omitted for workers. Once the risk assessment is completed, it is possible to carry out a risk register. The participatory risk analysis method was used to create what can possibly become a company operation register, starting from a careful review of all company procedures. This can in turn be considered as a module of the web software tool developed by Tosca called the Risk Register that also comprises an assets register together with the operations register, the schedule of monitoring activities, and feeds into the relevant KPI to be monitored defined by the company. Now the main benefits. Worker involvement in the risk assessment process. Critical knowledge of real operations included. Gives safety managers a better insight to the real tasks and risks. Increased worker awareness of safety. New hazards and mitigations identified. Process maps created and continue to be used for training new personnel. The analysis developed by Tosca was shared with Bolt Diageo staff. They had the chance to analyze the results and see the clear advantages of this new model of risk assessment. There are several details it is worth mentioning from this work. One of them is filing a better structured risk assessment, which has allowed not only the risk identification but also to provide a platform that allows for a greater understanding of their operations from a task model improved. In this way, greater clarity of the tasks are executed, facilitating future training. Also, identification of those activities that create a higher risk for the workers.